Hello Euphoniums, this is Mr. Kruger, and this video is to help you get a start on your region music so you can learn it. I'm going to give you some pointers, some information, so that you can figure out how to start learning this and get a good start on your music. Alright, the first thing that you need to look at on any new piece of music is over here in this top left hand corner. That's the key signature, right? Okay, we see three flats, B flat, E flat, and A flat. And so when we play this piece, we need to keep those notes in mind. So the first note is E flat, you're going to finger that first valve. This is an A flat, you're going to finger that first valve. And this is B flat, right? And so throughout the piece, we're going to read in this key signature because it doesn't change. Okay, something else that I need to point out, look at measure 11. You see there's a flat in front of that C, that accidental is what we call it. Okay, and so we have a C flat and we don't see that note very often. All right, so you might be like, well, how do I play C flat? I don't ever remember learning C flat. Well, the good news is that if you can play B natural and you've played B natural before, then guess what? You've also played C flat. They are essentially, in terms of how you hear them and how you play them, they're the same note. Okay, so over here, when you play B natural, that's the same thing as this C flat. They're just written differently on the staff. All right, so you're going to finger C flat 1 and 2, and you're going to play it just how you play the B natural over here. Does that make sense? That's called enharmonic, when those two notes sound the same and they're spelled differently. Okay, so those are probably the only notes that might give you a little bit of trouble. You know, we got easy A natural, should know that. Let's look at the time signature, because this might be tricky or new, because new things are tricky at first, but once we learn how it works, it's really not so tricky. All right, so it says we have 9/8 time. Usually you're probably used to reading in 4/4 time, but we've got a 9/8 time here in our time for our time signature. If you remember from your previous training, the top note, the top number tells you, normally that would tell you how many beats are in a measure, right? And so if we use that logic, we're going to say there are 9 beats in a measure. And then the bottom number, like when we're in 4/4 time, we see that bottom 4 and we're like, oh, well, that tells us that the quarter note's going to get the beat, or that a whole note gets 4 beats, however you want to say it. But usually we say, well, we know that the quarter note gets the beat when we see that 4 there. Okay, well, since we have an 8 on the bottom here, that would normally tell us that an 8th note gets the beat. Okay, so we have 9 8th notes in a measure. We'll look at measure 1. There's 9 8th notes in that measure, right? So that makes sense, right? Okay, but here's the thing. In 9/8 time and in 6/8 time, a lot of times the 8th notes happen so fast that you don't tap your feet to them. Okay, so for instance, look at this performance tempo. It says dotted quarter equals 70. Okay, so when you set your metronome to perform this piece, if you had already learned it, you would set it at dotted quarter equals 70. Of course, when you first start to learn it, I recommend going a lot slower. I'm going to teach this video at dotted quarter equals 45. So I would go ahead and set your metronome close to that tempo at 45 beats per minute. Okay, all right, so we see here that the performance tempo is dotted quarter equals 70. Well, there's 3 8th notes in a dotted quarter, right? And so if you were going to tap your foot to the 8th note, you would tap your foot at 210 beats per minute. That's really fast. And that's going to feel frantic, and your music's going to tend to sound frantic. Okay, but this music's supposed to sound relaxed. Okay, it's supposed to be pretty relaxed music. So we've got this slower toe tap for the dotted quarter. Okay, and that's why in 9/8 and 6/8 time, a lot of time you tap your foot to that dotted quarter. Okay, instead of the 8th note, unless it goes real slow. Sometimes you do tap to the 8th note, but not in this piece. All right, so you're going to tap your foot to the dotted quarter. Let me turn the metronome on so you can kind of hear how this works. All right, so you can hear there's a strong beat. That's what you tap your foot to. So tap, 2, 3, tap, 2, 3. And you hear 3 clicks grouped together, right? The way you do that on your metronome, there should be a setting where you can choose triplets. Like it'll show you probably 3/8 notes with a 3 above them. That's called a triple subdivision. You want to use triple subdivision on your metronome whenever you are working on this piece. Okay, so go ahead and set your metronome to that triple subdivision. And now let's try to figure out how we would count all this music. Okay, so I told you earlier that you would tap, if you're tapping your toe to my metronome, then you're tapping your toe to the dotted quarter. Well, that's right here. Look at measure 2. All right, so let's start measure 2. On beat 1, you've got a dotted quarter, and that gets 1 beat. Okay, well, then on beat 2, that's when the next note's going to happen, because this got 1 beat, right? Okay, beat 2, we've got a dotted half note. Well, how long is that? Usually a dotted half note would be 3 beats long in 4/4 time, but in 9/8 time, it's different, and that's because rhythm is mostly, a lot of times it's mostly about note relationships. Well, how does a dotted half note relate to a dotted quarter? It's twice as long as a dotted quarter. So this note is twice as long as that one. How long was this note? The dotted quarter is 1 beat. So the dotted half note is 2 beats. All right, so we're going to hold that beat 2, starting on 2, through beat 3, all the way until beat 1 of the next measure. So if I counted this measure, I would count 1, 2, 1. All right, notice I counted to 3 because there's 3 dotted quarters or 3 big beats in every measure. Okay? All right. So like look over here, measure 4. This rest will happen on beat 3 because that dotted quarter gets 2 beats, right? Same thing in measure 8. Okay, look at measure 12. This note gets 3 beats. You're going to think 1, 2, 3, and then on beat 1, you're going to go to the next note. Okay, so you got to be careful about that. Same thing on measure 16. 3 beats long. You got to hold it for a long time. Okay, so that covers most of the rhythms. I do want to backtrack just a little bit. When we're counting 8th notes in 6/8 time at Westbrook, we normally count them at this faster tempo. We count them 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly. And if I apply that to measure 1, it's going to go 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 1. You see how that works? 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 1, 2, 1, and so forth. Okay? All right. Oh, look at that. Something else. This is not a rhythmic thing, it's an articulation thing. You see this E here, this E flat? You're going to tongue that note, right? Because E flat is slurred to D, so you're going to tongue E flat, and then you're also going to tongue F. You got to be careful about these articulations. So that's going to sound like to, 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 to. You see how that's a tricky articulation pattern? That's why you go slow. We go slow so we can figure out the articulations. And if you need to go slower than this, then do it. All right? Because it's smart to get it right from the beginning. You don't want to practice it incorrectly. Okay, last rhythm before I show you the whole thing. Over here in measure 11, they give us a quarter note. But a quarter note doesn't get a full beat anymore, right? Because we are in, what time? We're in 9/8 time, right? Okay, so it's going to get 2 8th notes still. A quarter note always gets 2 8th notes, no matter what time signature in. So it's going to get 1 law, and then you rest on Lee. So this would go 1, 2, off. Or 1 law, off. 1, 2, lolly. You hear how that sounds? 1, 2, lolly, 3, lolly. Okay? All right, I'm going to count the whole thing for you. And that'll be it. Here we go. 1, 2, here I go. 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 1, 2. 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 1. 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 1, 2. 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 1. 1, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 1 lolly, 2. 1, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 1. 1, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 1 lolly, 2. 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 1. And that's it. Best of luck.